Hello, welcome back to a series of lectures on medicinal herbs. Last time we talked about Podophyllum hexandrum, its conservation, commercialization and its production. Today we will talk about another important medicinal plant, botanically known as Susuria costus. It is commercially known as costus, and in the areas where it is distributed it is commonly known as kot. This is an important plant primarily because on the basis of its distribution pattern, on the basis of its density as well as the habitat destruction. In J&K state in 1971 an act was created that is known as the Kot Act. Kot Act is an act of protection which helps to preserve and conserve the medicinal plants in their natural habitats, and as per this act nobody can be allowed to harvest or actually extract the plants from their natural habitats for commercialization or for trade to the drug manufacturers. On the basis of the overexploitation, this plant at present is labeled as critically endangered. That is, as per the data available during the last 10 years, its density has been reduced by about 75% in its natural habitats, wherein if it was occupying an area of say 10 square kilometers, it is at present occupying only an area of about 2.5 square kilometers. That means 75% area of its distribution has been completely destroyed in its natural habitats. On the basis of this status, this plant in turn is in need and necessity of creating and developing programs and strategies not only for its conservation but also for its commercial cultivation. In natural habitats, it is usually adapting to higher altitudes from a minimum of 2000 meters to a maximum of about 3300 meters above sea level, and as per the data available, it is distributed from Kashmir to almost eastern Himalayas, but the population, their density as well as the diversity of these population in each habitat is limited. Now in natural habitats, this plant depicts two important characters. One, it shows its perennial nature, wherein it is able to survive for as long as one desires, but more importantly its adaptability is restricted to those areas where almost whole day is exposed so that it is receiving sunlight or radiations throughout the day from the morning up to the sunset. That in turn is able to govern its vegetative as well as reproductive development. Now in nature, it has been seen to perennate through its rhizomatous portion, wherein every year this rhizome gives rise to new healthy plant, and that healthy plant in turn also is able to propagate sexually by producing flowers which produce large number of seeds. Now under controlled conditions, one can not only domesticate them but also commercialize their cultivation provided the habitat which is suitable for the plant as well as the conditions which are facilitating its development are created as well as monitored. Now in natural habitats, it has been seen to grow in rocky crevasse areas, especially at an area wherein it is densely populated and no other plant is actually altering its growth and development. Every year, this plant is able to enter reproductive cycle and produce per plant on an average 3 to 5 flowers, which in turn actually are capitulas, which in turn produce large number of seeds. But in nature, these seeds after dispersal have to face acute environmental conditions wherein the temperature sometimes drops to as low as -10 to -15 degrees Celsius, thereby affecting not only their survival but also hampering their germination as well as viability potential. But under controlled conditions, one can always not only collect the seeds at a proper stage but also store them till favorable conditions of their plantation as well as development can be monitored. Under controlled conditions, these seeds which have been harvested at the end of each growing season, they can be sown in the month of March or sometimes even in the month of April, depending upon not only the conditions of temperature but also of the rainy or wet winter seasons. These seeds are to be sown in a nursery bed, that is, wherein the density of the seeds does not in any way affect their development as well as their potential. Usually, The beds are prepared in the month of March itself, and each bed for the sowing of these seeds is fertilized with the addition of organic as well as inorganic nutrients. For this, cow-dung manure and DAP and NPK addition is necessary. These beds in turn are usually seen to facilitate not only the survival of the seedlings for a longer duration, but also in turn govern their developmental pattern. Once the seeds are sown in the month of March or sometimes even in April, it usually takes about 10 to 15 days for these seeds to give rise to healthy seedlings. Depending upon the growth pattern as well as the size they attain, they can be transplanted into main fields so that their further development is under control of the habitat as well as those who commercialize their conditions or their cultivations. Now, in general, the seedlings are either transplanted in the month of September or if possible in the next season's spring, that is usually in the month of March or April. But prior to transplantation, each bed wherein they have to cultivate them commercially as well as the bed from which they have to be dug out is to be irrigated so that the soil remains soft in texture and the root as well as the underground portion is easily dug out without cutting off any segment of the rhizome or even the rootlets. This usually facilitates not only 100% survival of the seedlings, but also in turn facilitates the proper maturity within a short span of time. These seedlings, once transplanted, are to be monitored for a minimum period of 30 to 45 days to see whether they are able to adapt to these conditions, plus whether they are able to develop into a proper healthy plant. On an average, in the first growing season, each seedling can attain a height of about 3 to 5 feet depending upon the habitat as well as the conditions in which it is cultivated. However, if the conditions are not suitable, that is where either the soil is not too fertile or the moisture content that is suitable for the plant to survive is not in good quantity, or where the temperature or the sunny conditions are not suitable, it sometimes takes about 2 years for this plant to attain a height of about 3 to 4 feet, even though at the end of each growing season it may show complete senescence. Usually, this plant after transplantation attains a productive stage in about 3 to 4 years, wherein rhizomatous portion is becoming almost 1 to 1.5 feet in length and wherein the thickness sometimes as thick as about 3 to 4 inches, so that it's in turn commercially suitable for extraction of the active principle as well as for the manufacture of the drugs. However, if this seed propagation, that is sexual reproduction, takes a longer period of time, in that case one can also use the vegetative means of propagation, that is wherein one can dig out the rhizomatous portion, that is commercially suitable part of the plant, divide it into segments, that is cut it off into smaller vegetative propagations or propagules, and then try to sow them directly into the transplantation fields. Here the important aspects are: one, to identify the plant which has the largest possible rhizomatous portion. Second, in that rhizomatous portion, identify the larger density of the vegetative buds which are available towards the apical portion of these rhizome. After identification, this rhizome is to be vertically split up into segments, wherein each segment is to have at least one or sometimes even more than one vegetative bud at its apex. After dividing it into parts, each rhizomatous segment is directly transplanted into the main field, and there each pit is to be dug out up to a depth of about 12 to 16 inches, and this vegetative propagule, that is rhizomatous portion, is to be planted in an erect manner with the bud pointing towards the surface of the soil. Each vegetative propagule is to be covered by the soil and then initially partially irrigated so that the loose soil texture becomes hard and the soil does not flow away by either the wind or by the birds or other animals walking across those fields. Now usually each vegetative propagule, that is the rhizomatous portion, is able to produce an main axis, that is the shootlet, within a span of about 1 week or sometimes more than about 10 days, depending upon the soil fertility as well as the potential of the rhizome. And this seedling, or that is the new vegetative plant that is developed from the rhizome, in turn can attain a productive status in a span of about 1 or at best about 2 years. That is, in the vegetatively propagated plants, the potential is to overcome whatever drawbacks there were in sexually propagated plants, that is wherein we had used the seeds. Now, after the plants attain a vegetative status, that is wherein the above ground portion develops, vegetative main axis develops, it starts development of branches, one has to add first the organic nutrients to the soil around each of these plants, so that each individual plant's habitat gets fertilized, and once the plant attains a height of about 3 feet, each bed in which we cultivate them, or in which somebody wants to commercially cultivate these, that one has to add organic fertilizers around each plant, as well as try to add inorganic fertilizers, especially urea, DAP and NPK in suitable quantities prior to the start of the reproductive cycle of the plant. That is, once the plant is still in vegetative phase, no flowers have developed, at that stage one has to add to each field some quantity of inorganic as well as organic nutrients, and after addition of these nutrients, each bed is to be partially dug out, so that these nutrients get fully mixed up with the soil, facilitating the absorption by the plant, and in turn facilitating the proper development as well as improving the productive potential of these plants. Now, at the end of each growing season, once the plant shows complete senescence, as well as depending upon the age of the plant, one can dig out the rhizome and as such either send it to the commercial manufacturers of the drug, that is pharmaceutical companies, or store it under controlled conditions wherein the rhizomes are kept in those labs or control rooms where the temperature does not go beyond 10 degrees Celsius and humidity does not go beyond 20%. That in turn means one has to either have a control room for its storage, or if that is not possible, after harvesting immediately send these rhizomatous portions to the commercial drug manufacturers. Now, it has also been seen that after harvesting, each rhizome in turn may show, in addition to the main rhizomatous portion, small rhizome pods which can in turn be cut off and can be used for vegetative propagation without affecting the quantity as well as quality of the product that has been harvested from the field where we have commercially cultivated these. Now, after being sent to the drug manufacturing industries or commercial producers, they first try to dry them under control condition till the moisture concentration is reduced up to a minimum level of about 5%, and at that level these in turn are subjected to chemical extraction, wherein so far many different alkaloids have been identified, which are aplotaxine, costus acid, costol, costos lactone, which are the commercially suitable alkaloid components of the rhizomatous portion, and each of these can be individually extracted and commercially used for the manufacture of medicine, which has following important properties. These medicines manufactured by using the rhizomatous portions are mainly used as antibacterial. That means they can be used for overcoming whatever bacterial infections one is suffering from, and in that case the quantity of consumption as well as the pattern of consumption is to be regularized as per the recommendation of the doctors. Second important usage of this is as antispasmodic. Again, in this case, the quantity of consumption as well as the method of consumption is to be monitored as recommended by the medical practitioners. It is also used as a carminative. In this case, usual recommendation is to consume it in the morning prior to consumption of any food items. That means empty stomach consumption as a carminative is recommended for Sussouria costus rhizomatous extracts. It is also used in the form of the extract for overcoming whatever skin ailments one is suffering from. That means whatever infection of the skin are caused by sometimes insects, sometimes pests, sometimes the polluted wind, that can be overcome by applying the paste of the rhizomatous portion on the skin, and that has been seen to be overcome within a very short span of time, sometimes even in one day itself. It is also used as a stimulant. It has been seen that those who have to carry out laborious work throughout the day, especially laborers working in high altitudes, in those areas it has been seen that they try to consume fresh rhizomes as a stimulant. And it has been seen that rhizome consumption not only facilitates them to work for longer duration, but also in turn improves their healthy conditions. That is why in most of the texts it is seen to be recommended as the most important stimulant available in natural habitats. It is also used, especially in Kashmir Himalayas, as a tonic by Gujar and Bakarwals. Their method of consumption is entirely unique. What they do is, after harvesting the rhizomatous portions, in the fresh form they try to boil it. After boiling, whatever juice is extracted out, that juice is recommended for consumption in the morning hours as well as in the evening hours, so that it in turn can help to improve the health of the laborious workers in the wild habitats, especially the migratory Gujar and Bakarwals. Another important use that has been discovered very recently is that it also acts as a vermifuge, wherein it is consumed either in the fresh form, that is, rhizome after harvesting is washed, consumed, and whatever juice oozes out is inhaled, and that in turn acts as a vermicide. Whatever worms are lying in the digestive system of the consumer, they get killed and are thrown out. However, it has also been seen that if the consumption is in larger quantities, that can sometimes affect the digestive and absorptive system of those who have used it in huge quantities. Now, on this basis, the plant has attained a status of being labeled as critically endangered because of overexploitation, yet its commercialization, its domestication, as well as its cultivation on a large scale is possible only if we determine two important factors. One, what is the habitat suitable under controlled conditions for its domestication in the first stage, and second, for its commercialization in terms of the active component, that is the rhizomatous portion. Second important aspect is to see whether control condition cultivation is in any way affecting the quality as well as the quantity of the active principle lying within the rhizomatous portion. Now, in this case, what has been observed is that if we grow it under controlled conditions in open habitats, that means where no sunlight is seen and wherein the habitat is having hard textured soils, lesser quantity of moisture, there not only does the plant survive, but it also is able to produce whatever quality drug or active component is stored in the rhizomatous portion. However, if such habitats are not possible under commercial conditions, in that case only one recommendation is always made, and that is, first try to use to domesticate the seedlings, so that these seedlings give rise to healthy plants, and after these healthy plants attain a productive stage, transplant them to controlled natural habitats, that is, those habitats where the overexploitation or irregular harvesting of these cannot be allowed, so that these plants are maintained and allowed to grow till they attain a status of harvesting and using for extraction of the drug. Now, in Kashmir, only two habitats have been so far identified as suitable for its commercial cultivation. One is an habitat in the open slopes of Gulmarg, and second is an habitat in the open slopes of Sonamarg, where it can not only serve as a natural population but also can be grown as a commercialized crop in the areas suitable for its growth. It has been seen that in natural habitats, if any plant is actually providing shade to it or creating shady conditions, the plant may survive. That is, the Susuria costus may survive, but its productive potential, its quality as well as the quantity of the active principle, even in its natural habitats, is getting hampered, so that its commercial value or the active principle concentration for manufacture of the drug is getting altered, sometimes by 2, sometimes even by 5%. That in turn reflects that even under natural habitats, any plant which can actually destroy its habitat can cause a damage to its production as well as its quality. Now, those who want to commercialize its cultivation under wild habitats, therefore must first select habitats where no taller trees, bushes or shrubs are growing, but wherein the plant is able to remain exposed throughout its life cycle and then be able to produce whatever its quality product is, that is the rhizomatous portion. Now, those of you who are interested in commercializing its cultivation, for them I have to make just two recommendations. One, try to identify the habitats on the basis of what are the characters which are suitable for the plant. Second, try to first identify which part of the plant they can use for its domestication. Is it the seed they can actually use for multiplying it, or is it the rhizomatous portion that they can use for its multiplication? Under controlled conditions, even though both are possible, yet the habitat in turn may play a vital role in commercializing or improving its quality as well as quantity of production. More importantly, once you commercialize it, what will you do to the product? For that, they must actually try to contact those drug manufacturers or companies who have actually used this plant for manufacturing specific drugs or medicine for commercial trade. That in turn means that one must be aware that after production one also has to identify the source or identify the linkage through which they can sell these to those, so that they can in turn be useful to commercialize their trade or commercialize their cultivation at sometimes regional level, sometimes zonal level, sometimes national, or sometimes even at international level. Now, in Kashmir, the State Medicinal Plant Board, in cooperation with the Medicinal Plant Board of Government of India, is trying to facilitate not only conservation but also commercialization of cultivation of important and selected medicinal plants on the basis of their potential, on the basis of their status, as well as on the basis of their market value, so that any ordinary person having interest in domestication of plants, especially of medicinal value, can actually create a commercial strategy for their conservation first and subsequently their commercial production. Now, in this case, whosoever is in need of guidelines or whosoever is in need of having to assert a commercialization of plants, they must try to first determine not only the status of the plant but also what facilities one can avail which are available in the state itself or which can be provided by the central government agencies, especially the Central Medicinal Plant Board, or can be provided by the State Medicinal Plant Board. Of all of you who are listening to this lecture, who are interested in trying to domesticate or commercialize the cultivation of this plant, that is Susurya costus, they should try to actually first identify whether the habitats are suitable for its cultivation and whether they can in turn ultimately be able to produce what the demand of the medicinal market as such is. I hope that all of you who are listening or who are watching this telecast are able to understand what are the primary requirements, what is the status of the plant, and what strategies they can create and recreate to not only conserve the plant but also develop its commercial strategies for its improvement in production as well as quality. I hope that in future, whenever we discuss such programs, one must be actually keen to not only communicate their information about the strategy they have developed with the Medicinal Plant Board, but also with drug companies which will in turn be able to purchase as well as commercialize this production. I hope that in future we will continue to discuss this issue further and talk about different plants, and that in turn will help us to develop a medicinal plant commercial potential for not only improvement in their quality and quantity but also helping us to conserve what is lying in the Kashmir Himalaya in general and whole Himalayas in particular, so that in future one cannot label any plant as critically endangered. I'll see you in future with these words that medicinal plant cultivation and their commercialization will be one of the basic sources of income for all of us.